Great. Okay. So from AU, I guess just as an intro from AUA, we have Professor Aarti Sethi and Professor Charles Hirschkind here to answer some questions about being an undergrad in anthropology here at UC Berkeley. We've sourced some questions from our social medias over the past couple of days. So we're going to ask those questions first, and then we'll move into kind of like an open Q&A session.
Okay.
Before we start, do we want to maybe, if Professor Hirschkind and Professor Sethi, if you want to give a quick introduction?
Okay. I'm Charles Hirschkind. I'm an anthropologist. Let's see. What else can I tell you? What would else would be?
I know in your little video that you sent us for our Instagram, you mentioned that you're the anthropology. Am I saying that? I'm saying that right. Yeah, anthropology department chair.
That's right.
I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, this is my my last semester's chair. It's been a 3-year stint, so I came in at the beginning of COVID, more or less, and it's been a tumultuous time, but luckily we're moving out of some of the hardship associated with COVID and so on, and yeah, so as chair, you're sort of, a lot of your time goes to administrative work, writing reports and letters, and so I don't get to do as much research as I'd like, or as much writing, and so I'm looking forward to not being so entangled in bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Starting next semester. So.
Absolutely. We're excited for you also. Professor Sethi, if you'd be able to give a quick intro to yourself as well.
I'm Aarti Sethi. I'm also an anthropologist. I work in Central India. That's where my current fieldwork is based. I work on agricultural worlds. I look at many things to do with living in rural areas. I am curious about how humans and non-humans interact, which some of you know because you're in my humans, non-humans class. I'm interested in thinking about religious experience, which some of you also know because you're in my religion class. And I'm just generally curious about the world and why people do the things they do.
I didn't know you're teaching a religion class, so am I.
I am.
I see.
Fantastic. Well, great. Well, again, thank you guys both for coming, and I guess we can jump into the questions here. Our first question is sourced from our Instagram. Someone had asked about what, let's see here. The first question we got, if you were an undergrad, or I don't think they specified, but if you were applying to go to college, say you're starting your undergrad in the year 2023, what schools would you be looking at, or maybe even for grad school, what schools would you apply to if you had to do it all over again?
Aarti, you want to lead off?
I'm actually going to let you take this one first.
Well,
Chair, you should have the honor of answering this.
we can switch. We can go back and forth. So maybe this one we start with Charles.
No, that's fine. Those are two separate questions. Like, if I think about it in terms of undergrad, if you were just coming out of high school and you were applying for an undergrad, then I think considerations about like this the size of the school that you feel best fits, your own preferences, and people can be very different about whether they enjoy being in a very large institution and some of the anonymity that goes with that, as opposed to sort of, a kind of more intimate setting of a small college. So that's often a major consideration. I think, you want, if you have certain interests you go in with, then of course that may also, you may want to gravitate to, want to make sure that the schools you're applying to are, take those interests seriously and have well-developed programs in those areas. I think, like if you think of the differences between, often it comes to a difference between small liberal arts schools and large state or private colleges. And they both have, they offer different things. I've guest lectured often in small liberal arts college, and there's something I greatly appreciate about the sort of small scale and the sort of the way in which people get to know each other more closely and interact more frequently and have more of a sense of belonging to a community often than they do at the larger schools. And I think, that can be a great part of college experience. And on the other hand, the large schools offer you, right, a wider variety often of opportunities. And you're more on your own as far as seeking them out. You have to sort of take it on yourself to explore what's available. Are there talks or activities or clubs that would be interesting, and you have to seek those out? And it's not sort of, they're not just sort of as handed to you as easily as they are in small schools. Location is a big thing for a lot of people. Like, where do you want to live? Like, often that one thinks about, I want to live in a big city because I come from a smaller place, and for graduate school, like I went to New York City and I hadn't lived there before, and I think the city was a big part of my experience there, and it really, was. And cities offer, both intellectual and sort of cultural opportunities that you don't find in a lot of the sort of smaller places where liberal arts colleges are. So when I think about an undergrad, those are, I think, the kind of things that are at the top of my list. Also, there's financial considerations you would definitely want to think about. Is it going to force you into a life of servitude and debt, or is there, is it manageable, and is there any kind of support from the school? And I would also think, talking to undergrads in programs and getting a sense of, is it a place where people feel like they thrive and feel connected, or do they feel more alienated and somewhat kind of, there's great resources, but there's no really sense of community that, that people feel there. So all of those things I think are important. Aarti, you want to expand on that, or?
I'm actually, the reason I asked you to speak to this, Charles, is because I have absolutely no experience of undergraduate education in America. Because the first time I came to America was for graduate school, and I did all my education before that in big public universities in India. So I have no idea what an undergraduate experience is like actually in America. And I'm learning from all of you now that I'm here of what it is or should be, or what you hope.
I have two kids, one who went to the University of Michigan, a massive school, and the other went to Ithaca College, a small school. So I do speak with some authority on this, with some experience on it.
Definitely. Well,
So
it's definitely,
yeah, go
sorry, I
ahead.
don't mean to cut you off, but
Go on.
it's definitely interesting hearing both of those perspectives. I'm thinking maybe we can roll into, we talked about undergrad. There was another question that's, any advice on how to start looking for grad schools? Um, Maybe we can roll into that question also. Uh, what is the difference between like what you're looking for in an undergrad school versus a grad school, and what do you think the focus should be there? Um, Maybe we could start with Professor Sethi, and I think there's probably a different experience there, so that'll definitely be interesting.
So I mean, I imagine that it's actually an entirely different set of calculations that you're making. Uh,
Hmm.
the most important thing is, of course, to look at the department that you're applying to and who in that department you would like to work with. When you go into grad school, well, this is anthropology, which is the discipline in grad school that I know, but one goes into graduate school with a kind of project that you want to pursue. And graduate school means that even though people's projects change, but people have a kind of idea of the broad questions that they want to explore. And so the first thing that you do is to actually look at a department that you plan on applying to, see what are the interests of the faculty there, what they think about, what their research is on, and see if you would actually be a good fit there. If faculty in that department would be in a place to help you think about the questions you want to, because graduate school is a long period of your life, 7 years at the minimum, pursuing something. And so you want that the most important consideration are the people that you want to be working with. So that's the
Hmm.
first thing. And then other kinds of considerations, which are very important. How much funding will that grad school give you? Will you be able to sustain yourself on the stipends that you will get? Where is that grad school? Is it diverse? Is it not diverse? What is the kind of community you'll be part of? I highly recommend writing to PhD students who are in the program at that time and getting their perspective, because you will get very different perspectives from faculty, obviously, and students who are in the program and going through it. So I really recommend doing that. What are the other kinds of considerations? The most important thing actually is that, and I tell people this, which is graduate school in anthropology is training you currently to write a book, to write something called a dissertation. They're very highly writing driven programs. So it's good to read a little anthropology to see whether it's of interest to you to write something like that or not. Because a lot of people come into a graduate school without actually an undergrad degree in anthropology, which is perfectly okay. It's what actually builds richness inside anthropology departments. But that's what I would say. I would say that these are the things to keep in mind. Charles, is there stuff you want to add?
No, I think that makes very good sense to me, and yeah, I mean, in talking to grad students, you also and grad students who are there, and usually, if you contact like somebody in a departmental office, they'll put you in touch with graduate students, and um, and you want to get a sense from them of, again, how is it a department where students feel supported? Do they feel they um, are given the resources they need? Do they feel they are given the kind of attention they need to thrive, including the sort of, both broader support from the department, but also the kind of mentoring and feedback that they get from their advisors? Is it a place where students feel like, yeah, I am sustained and supported in this intellectual development and so on? Often when you're applying to grad school, you don't necessarily go in with a fully fleshed out project. And so actually in the application itself is maybe the first time that you force yourself to craft like some semi-coherent project. And it's a kind of exercise that's part of the application process. This sort of, as Aarti said, it's not you're committed to necessarily doing that project, but it's a demonstration that you can formulate a project. So you want to start thinking sort of early about what might that look like, because it's sort of hard, that task, especially if you come, you know, if you haven't done, you know, research before and you haven't been asked to, you know, to design a project like that. That's kind of a challenge. And so I would, you know, I would say you should be speaking with, you know, some of your instructors like Aarti and me here, and saying, listen, I'm thinking of applying to graduate school. This is kind of my interests, and have discussions that sort of to start sort of honing what might be a project. And one way to do that, of course, is if you're doing a senior thesis. And for a lot of people, the senior thesis is one vehicle for elaborating a project. It both, you know, it has the sort of structure of a mini dissertation, and it gives you some experience in that exercise. But you know, I think students should reach out to available faculty here and go in and have discussions. Like, you just can sign up for somebody's office hours. You go and say, listen, I'm thinking of graduate school so far. These are the things that are kind of struck me as interesting in anthropology, and I'm not exactly sure what I want to do, but I'd like to talk about it. And usually those conversations, that's a one way to sort of start getting ideas. And so, yeah, I think that's what I would add. Otherwise, I think Aarti, you know, laid it out well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a lot of great information to keep in mind. I think kind of in the vein of you guys both, I think, touched on the writing portion of the graduate school application and that kind of project portion. I think that kind of maybe dovetails into a question that was asked about careers in sociocultural anthropology besides academics. I know what I think both of you tend to focus on as far as your studies would be grouped into that kind of that 4 category distinction of sociocultural, I might say. And so, you know, I guess, what are the careers that kind of maybe fit in that space of anthropology?
Can I just add, Marissa had a question, I think, on the earlier discussion, so I want to give her a chance.
Absolutely. I didn't see that.
Sorry, no, I like raised my hand and then I lowered it. I was just
Oh, okay.
wondering, do you guys know if the GRE is still being like used in a lot of the grad school applications for anthropology?
I think many departments have said that they don't consider GRE scores anymore. We don't, right, Charles, now?
Yeah.
We don't. When I applied to graduate school 10 years ago, no, more than 10 years ago, 12 years ago, about, they did. But different departments always gave it different weights. So Columbia, where I did my grad school, you had to submit GRE scores, but they didn't care about it. And they made it very clear that they didn't care about GRE scores. It was a formality. The university required it, and so they took it. But I think most departments don't care about GRE scores. This is something that you can easily ask, actually. This is not, you know, you can just simply reach out and ask and say, hey, do you care about GRE scores? Do you need GRE scores?
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right.
Great.
So you asked a question about careers, and you are thinking, so
I think elaborate more on that. I think this is probably in the vein of what I hear a lot in anthro classes, and maybe this is just because I've taken a lot of art classes, is there's a more recent emphasis on like CRM fields, almost as like an alternative to like an archaeology academic career. And so I think this question is kind of in that vein, but more talking about the more sociocultural side of anthropology, in that for groups of anthropology distinction.
Do you mean, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Aarti.
No, I was wondering, do you mean, Ian, if you do
Mhm.
if you major in anthropology as an undergrad, or do you mean after a PhD in anthropology?
The question wasn't super specific. I think we could probably say if you major as an anthropology in your undergrad.
Mhm.
But if there's any examples that you have for post PhD, um, I'm having a hard time thinking of anything that would fit in post PhD besides like a professor position. So um, maybe we could start with undergrad, and if there's any examples of like a PhD, we can go into that.
I think, anthropology involves a lot of writing, as Aarti said. And so often, jobs that are, writing heavy, and varieties of journalism are often anthropologists go into straight from undergrad into kind of journalistic or projects. They often work in different kinds of NGOs, many with a kind of international focus. Like there was an undergrad from Berkeley I knew well, who she went right into the Asia Society, which is a society that that runs programs in different Asian countries, and so she was involved in like program development and assessment, and because she had skills at writing, and she also had a kind of broader global perspective associated with anthropology, then they saw her as a good candidate for that position. What else? There are various there's various interests in tech in kind of bringing in anthropologists who are seen as able to sort of provide a human direct dimension to what otherwise lacks one. And so I think there's an interest in there's a recognition, let's say, that anthropology has something to offer to tech companies who often stumble over what might be called the human dimension of their own projects and products and so on. And I have a friend, and she has a PhD in anthropology, but she works at Waymo, which is the Google's self-driving car division. And she provides sort of assessments on like the unpredictabilities of human behavior that the sensors on the car might not be fully capable of anticipating. So I do think in tech there's a space there, and some go into people also are interested in teaching sometimes, and they'll get a teaching certificate following an anthropology degree if they're interested in teaching. I think and anthropologists maybe are often interested in other parts of the world, and so they look for positions, as I said, often like in NGOs or in kinds of development work, development agencies. There are both state and non-state development agencies, around the world that hire people with the kind of skills that anthropologists develop. What else? Aarti, what else comes to mind?
I think, I know anthropologists who become filmmakers. And I mean, people do a whole variety of things. I know someone who makes podcasts on things of their interest. I certainly know students who went into tech and ran sort of user group experiments. I think anthropology, because it gives you a way to think about society, is like an anthropologist can bring something to many different kinds of work environments. Journalism is a big one. Development, policy work is something that anthropologists do. Creative streams like filmmaking, radio. A lot of anthropologists go into teaching, like high school, which is a really great thing to do.
Mhm.
What are the other things that I know? Anthropologists join museums,
Mhm.
something like careers in museums. This is something I know that anthropologists sometimes do.
We had a question from the chat. I'm not sure if that is in
Hannah, yeah.
relation to these jobs.
Hannah?
Yeah, thanks. I recently spoke to a sociology professor from Fresno State, and he was telling me that that professors, in his opinion, professors should encourage their undergraduates to pursue like sociology, anthropology PhDs unless they were, extraordinarily like interested, or they felt like there was nothing else they could possibly do. And his reasoning was that the job field market is so difficult after you get a PhD, and most people are not really able to save money during that time. So I guess I'm wondering if you both could speak to sort of the realisticness of both. Well, I guess, yeah, really getting a job that can be financially sustainable after a PhD, and getting a spot as a professor. I guess I don't know if that's exactly the goal, or if there's other. I mean, I know there's other types of positions. So yeah.
I agree with him. I agree with him. I do think that now one should think about long and hard about why you're doing a PhD. And if the only thing you can imagine doing with your PhD is to get a tenure track job in the academy, then you should think again, because it is true. The situation, the job market is extremely hard. We don't anticipate getting much better. So if you really want to do a PhD because you want to spend 7 years of your life pursuing something and being able to work intensely on it, but you are not, but if you are not able to make that PhD into a tenure track job, that is not going to devastate you, then do a PhD. But I do think everyone going into a humanities PhD today does need to think about that decision. Honestly, I do believe that. If you were doing a PhD in economics, it wouldn't matter. As long as there's capitalism in the state, economists and political scientists will always have jobs. But this is not true for people who get PhDs in the humanities. I think everyone should walk into it with some caution. At least that's my realistic opinion. Charles, I don't know what you have to say.
No, I think that's true. So, I think, I mean, one thing a lot of anthropologists who get undergraduate degrees in anthropology go on to do other things. And, for example, lots go into law.
Oh, yes. Yes, they do. That's exactly correct.
Mm-hmm.
And, but they go into other fields as well. And so I've known some to go into medicine. So like there's the anthropology degree can be a useful sort of starting place for going on careers that are outside the discipline itself in various ways. I do think Aarti's right that, there's the number of jobs for PhDs in the academy and sort of tenure track jobs has been in decline, particularly as the universities around the United States have shifted towards relying increasingly on adjunct lecturers for the bulk of teaching. That's not the case yet at Berkeley, though it is a trend. But most universities I heard in the United States are up to 70% lectures and 30% tenured faculty. So that means they're hiring people at like poverty wages without benefits to teach classes and without giving them stability, continuity, tenure, and so on. So that's the bleak situation in the academy right now, and all of the market forces are pushing in that direction. So, so people who get anthropology degrees, that's not just an argument against it, but I think Aarti's right that it should be something that you do because in large part it really excites you and you think it's something that you feel like dedicating yourself to for a period. And I think with a PhD in hand, of course there are things you can do. They just aren't necessarily tenure track jobs. And like all of the jobs I mentioned, with a PhD you step in at a higher level in all of those things, right? Whether it's working in international agencies, or whether it's working in tech, or whether it's working in NGO positions. There are positions for PhDs in all of those, and for anthropology PhDs, and they're just more senior positions. So I think so you really want it's one of those things where you want to feel there's going to be something worthwhile that you will have accomplished and flourished in and enriched yourself through in going deep into an intellectual project. And but if you just want a job, then you should be in tech.
And also remember that because a PhD is 7 years of your life, you're going to be out of the job market for 7 years, which means you will not earn as much as you would have had you actually gotten an actual job. So this is a calculation to make. Whether if you have a family that you need to sustain on a graduate student stipend, and that's a question. I mean, I think that you choose to enter an anthropology PhD having made a decision, looking at your life, where you're at, what your responsibilities are, and then make that decision knowing all of the things that come alongside it, is what I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
So, could I ask a follow-up question? Just a brief. I guess in Berkeley, what would be considered adjunct in terms of like wages and benefits and whatever would be like GSIs and postdoc teachers, or who would be an
Berkeley doesn't rely, well, anthropology at least doesn't rely on it as much, but we hire, they're called lecturers. They're not GSIs. They are people with PhDs, usually in the discipline, and we hire them to teach like 1 or 2 classes in a year. And so they are not full-time employees. They're just hired for that one contract period, and at much lower salaries, and without the benefits, healthcare and so on, that go with a steady job. So as I said, the trend now is most universities are approaching the 70% mark of relying on adjuncts. That means that because they pay them so much less that it's, the university sees it as a financial windfall for them. Berkeley is not like, we hire in anthropology about 2 lecturers in a semester, maybe, to teach one class. And sometimes not at all, but right now, some of you will have taken classes maybe with Chris Lohman, or will know him, and he's been teaching for us for a while. Or Brian Carl, who taught who taught Anthro 3 last year. And Brian teaches regularly at the California College of Arts and Crafts. He's been teaching there for years. He teaches in various places around the Bay Area. He's involved in all sorts of things, but he has to cobble together like these various teaching gigs, which are unpredictable how often he'll be offered such opportunities. So that goes with that kind of life.
It's yeah, I completely agree with Charles that universities are cutting funding across the board, and it's just cheaper to rely on contractual labor, which is what, and than to hire permanent faculty, which is what tenure track. When you get tenure, then you're permanently employed by the university, technically, till you choose to retire or die, or the university falls apart, and those two things are not in anyone's hand. But yeah, this is why, if your sole goal is to get a tenured position, then you should know that the job market sucks.
Sorry, can I ask one more follow-up, or I can also nod?
Sure.
Oh, go on.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess, are there any like statistics on what percentage of PhDs for humanities who are looking for, lasting, I guess, tenured jobs get it? I mean, is there any, or could you make up a number that you think?
I think Chronicle of Higher Ed and so on generate these numbers. I mean, I personally would not know these. Charles, would you?
Well, the thing is that it entirely depends on the school you go to.
Okay, yeah, that's right. That's also correct.
So, if you go to certain schools, then your odds are not bad. The vast majority of schools, then your odds are not good. So,
I mean, this is a very much of a prestige game also. This is
there's a hierarchy there, and however critical we may be of it, it continues to reproduce itself.
Very much so.
So, the schools that you might imagine as, prestigious schools tend to be the ones where those people get jobs. So, people coming out of Berkeley do pretty well in the job market in anthropology. But, there's not that many schools that are like that.
And again, even so,
yeah,
it is still very, very, very hard. You cannot guarantee at all that a degree from all of the schools that you would imagine are top schools in the prestige game through which the academy is structured, which reproduces itself as a class hierarchy and so on. It's still very hard. I have friends, brilliant academics from Columbia, from Harvard, from Stanford, who didn't get tenure track jobs. It's just hard. It's just very, very hard. Is all I want to say.
There was a study about a year ago. I think I might have it that I could send on that shows you the percentage of people who get jobs coming out of the different schools, tenure track, who get academic jobs. Yeah, I'll try to dig that out, and I could circulate it.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, if you found that and you wanted to email it to us, we can just send it to our email list for sure.
Okay.
yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we have one more question that was sourced from online, and then I think we can open it up to see if anyone else. Yeah.
I think since we're running out of time, let's ask. I think Eliana had a question, so let's just hand it over to her first.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I was just curious about two things. One, just a small little question attached to like the previous line of thought, wherein do you think it is best to go to the same undergrad school as grad school if you were to pursue a PhD? Like, would you think that's more beneficial in terms of like connections, or is it more beneficial to go to a different one? And then the second line of questions, or the second question is essentially, in what areas do you believe within the realm of socioculture anthropology there is a specific demand for attention? Like, for instance, let's say, there's not a lot of coverage on the deaf community or something like that. Like, what specifically do you think is in high demand?
Aarti, you want to?
That's a very hard question for me to answer. I think there are questions that animate a moment as opposed to things that are in high demand. Do you see the distinction there? That there are issues that are alive and are present and are questions people are thinking about. But it's important when you're going into graduate school, you can never tailor your project to what you think will be in demand 10 years later. See, you go in with a curiosity that is your own, because you cannot actually fashion a project to what you think the market will want 10 years later. What you can do is think about the questions that are alive in a moment that interest you. Migration, mobility, climate change. I mean, these are things that people are thinking about right now. Race, because they are questions that are alive in this moment, right? They are questions that appear to people in the world that need interesting, rich explorations of. So that is how I would put it. Big data. How do algorithms structure our life? I mean, these are they're not high demand areas. They're alive questions. The questions that are just alive. You see that.
I think high demand was a poor choice of wording. I didn't mean it in terms of market. I just meant in terms of like things that people are interested in, or that is yeah.
You would know this. All of the things you're thinking about, all of the things your friends are thinking about, things that you read people, you see, questions that occur to you are the questions that animate a moment at a time, right? Climate change. It's because we live in the end times in so many ways. So questions that you would ask at any given moment about the world you're in, the world that we're all in, are the questions that people come in with into the discussion. You see, and think of anthropology as a place in which to find ways of thinking about these questions. Yeah, Alex, do you want to?
Yeah, I like the way Aarti put it, that you should, that the questions that you find most pressing and most captivating and relevant today, there are many of the ones Aarti mentioned. There are trends, right? And so I remember speaking to a book publisher about 3 years ago, and she said, well, we're looking for books in anthropology on climate change, on the AI and big data, and on refugees, and that's all we're looking for. And that was like, those were seen to be the pressing issues of the moment that they feel that they could guarantee their sales with. And so that gives you that shows you where the market's at with this, and it does have some influence, but it's not. When we are reading applicants to our department, we're really not thinking that way. And but there is a lot of work, for example, on climate change and the environment. That's a booming industry now in anthropology, and it's for obvious reasons that it's one of the most pressing questions of our time. And so to answer to the first thing about, you asked Eliana about schools, one thing is that many universities will dissuade you from trying to apply to the same school where you did your undergraduate. And indeed, there's a certain sort of unwritten notion that it's beneficial for people to sort of, if they've already sort of explored the resources at one place, that as they go to graduate school, there's some benefit in learning from others. So it's not a hard and fast rule, and we do occasionally accept our own undergraduates, but it's slightly unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, usually people go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Usually. It doesn't mean that schools don't admit their own students into the graduate program. There are, but even in Columbia, usually people switch schools, change schools.
And the question comes up when admissions is discussed. Like people say, this person's coming out of Berkeley. Like, would they benefit more from going elsewhere at this point? So that is a question that when applications are being assessed.
Right on. Well, we are coming up on 6, and I do want to be sensitive of our professor's time here. So if I could just close out with one quick last question that we had submitted to us. I think this is probably aimed more at Charles, but Aarti, if you've heard anything, please chime in. They were asking that about our art and art practice building, which had our name changed from previously. Are there any rumblings of renaming it to maybe a different person in anthropology, or different name in general?
I think there will be a different name. Originally, I thought it would be either Wells Fargo or Chase, depending on who gave the biggest donation. But now I think there's some pressure that perhaps a certain Native American name might have a stronger case. So that those are rumblings I hear, though, and it's nothing I know has been decided. I believe the campus wants to initiate a conversation of some kind around this. I originally thought it would just be determined by, a chance to the university to make money by looking for a donor who wanted to put their name on the building. But I'm thinking they might not, now that that might not look good. So I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm guessing the Ohlone building or something. Before we go, can I just say one thing? And that is, we mentioned this thing about the library at the beginning. So it's, the word has come down from on high that the library now the decision has been made to close it. And so this is just in the last week or something we've heard. In fact, I'm supposed to go to a meeting in a week where I'm going to be officially told this. But the cat is out of the bag, basically. And so we don't want that to happen. And we don't think you want that to happen, or that anyone in our department wants that to happen. And so we're thinking, we're trying to sort of mobilize a kind of media campaign, and to we've tried for a year to sort of make the case to the people who oversee the library and to the campus at large about why that anthropology needs that library and why it's really essential for us, and they have not listened. And so at this point, on one hand, we need to sort of put pressure by going public. And so we are trying to get some various things published in media, and trying to sort of garner some publicity that way. But we also want to talk about, with students, both grad and undergrad students, about getting students involved in this as well. So that's a prelude to say, I'm gonna have a meeting with students next week, a kind of crisis meeting, to brainstorm about what might be done and what students might want to do. And so I will send out a note in the next day or so. I was thinking holding it Wednesday afternoon. would that work for you guys?
And
I-
Charles, we have class on Wednesday after.
I know any day of the week somebody's going to have a class.
I know.
So what time is your class over, Aarti?
4.
4. So 4 could be a time like that we could do this.
And we were hoping that that you could send the word out on all of your networks so that we have a good showing of people who come, because we all now need to, and you all will have to help us fight this, because it's, I think that it's not any more faculty and our pressure. It's really students and students' voices is who can actually influence the university in any way. It's really, don't you agree, Charles, that it's now the door of students, undergrad students, graduate students to and here's the thing, we cannot be the department that we are right now if we don't have that library. We just can't be. All of us, many of us, use that library for work, to sit, to read, to research. It holds holdings of the anthropology department. It has manuscripts. It has objects. I mean, it is one of the only 4 dedicated anthropology libraries in the entire country.
3, I think. 3.
3, sorry, yeah, 3. So it's a huge loss that the university is actually taking away from our department. And it's, if you look at, our department, anthropology, is one of the kind of top 4 departments to do anthropology. And very much, the library is very much part of that. Because without it, we can't be the department that we are. And so we really need to fight this fight for our library.
Yeah.
We faculty can't do it anymore because they won't. It's not us.
They don't listen to us.
They don't listen to us. They will listen to students. They'll have to listen to students. So we need students to. So
absolutely.
I'll send out a note and you could circulate it and reach out to others, and if you can come, that would be great.
So yes, we'll strategy.
We'll definitely get something put up. I do publicist stuff, so I can make some stuff here, and I'll make sure to circulate that around as soon as you get that to me. And there's a time and date for it.
Yeah, and all of you are so much more plugged into different kinds of media and making things and putting the word out, and we need your help. We really do.
I do have a question about the library thing. I know that the library closes at 5 o'clock. If we did this next week on Wednesday at 4 o'clock, would it be efficient or more beneficial if we did it in the library?
I was thinking that. It's just that would mean that we'd probably have to leave at 5, but I do think it's a good place to hold it, and I think that would be my top choice.
And then as soon as they should close it, we can just walk outside it and do it in the hallway in front of our closed library.
Yes, I think, Jesus is the one with the key, and he closes it, a graduate student. And so I don't think there's a problem if he lets us stay another half an hour or something. So, well, he might get in trouble with his boss. That's true. I know, we can ask him. We can.
The key to you, Charles. You can get in trouble with Jesus's boss.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah,
absolutely. All
right. Well, it's good to talk to you.
Yes, thank you both for coming so much, sir. And on kind of that note, but let's definitely get the word out. We could probably stop the recording right